my name is Fatini Amirah binti Nasir, matrix number 056376. I'm from group 16, and today I will explain to you about the Bangsamoro conflict in southern Philippines. So, a brief introduction to Mindanao. It is actually one of thousands of islands in Philippines, and the majority of the residents are Moro, which majority of them are Muslim. So before diving deeper into the history of this conflict, the general idea is that the crisis was an attempt of insurgency that was initiated by the Moro insurgent groups. It was actually more like a rebellion against colonial power at that time, which was Spain and the United States. So the root problem was actually not that complicated, but other external factors such as the complicated relationship between the Filipinos due to the many years of social dispersal between them had made the conflict so much worse than it already was. Okay, the story begins when Spain, who colonized Philippines at the time, wanted to spread Christianity to that island. And many of the inhabitants were forced, some mutually agreed, to convert from their original religion to Christianity. But what the Spaniards didn't know, that before they colonized that island, many of the inhabitants had already devoted their faith to Islam. And so started the spark that wanted to resist from colonial power, because the colonization had stopped the spreading of Islam on that island. However, the moral action of resisting was opposed by other inhabitants, which was Christian Filipino. So when Spain saw that these two factions were fighting against each other, they kind of took advantage of that situation and spread their propaganda, which was the divide and rule propaganda. And because of this propaganda, the Moro and the Christian Filipinos relationship had gotten so much worse, because the Moro wanted to fight for their homeland independence, while the Christian Filipino showed their support to Spain. So years passed, and then the Spain-America War happened in 1989. So during that time, Spain lost to America, so they had to transfer their power to US through the Treaty of Paris. Okay, before I move on to the US colonization, it is very important for us to understand that first, during the Spaniard rules, the Mindanao was never ruled by Spain, and at the end of Spain rule, the Mindanao and Sulu were declared independent by General Emilio Aguinaldo on 12 June 1989. So when the power was transferred from Spain to US through the Treaty of Paris, Mindanao and Sulu were included as Spain's territory. Of course, there were many disagreements that arose back then, but the treaty was signed anyway by Sultan of Sulu and the US with several conditions. Firstly, Muslims in Mindanao and Sulu must favor neutrality, and in exchange, the US stated that they will never interfere with their state of affairs. But of course, it was just sweet talk. In 1902, the US established the Philippines Organic Act, which gave many negative consequences on the Filipinos, especially the Moro in Mindanao and Sulu. For example, under this act, the Mindanao and Sulu regions were to emerge as a single province, which is the Moro province, and was ruled by a governor. Many were furious because the ruling by governor had disregarded the authority of sultans and other traditional leaders, which, if you remember earlier, the US stated that they would never interfere with the Moro affairs. So in simple terms, the US rule was very opposed to the Moro way of life. So of course, they went through another phase of rebellion, but it only resulted negatively because they were settled under military rule for a decade. If you think that was the worst thing America had done to Moro, well, you are wrong, because the Moro was treated more harshly by the Americans, and many of their rights were taken away from them. One of the examples is that the American practiced somewhat discriminatory land laws enforcement, which discriminate the Moro through their religion. What I'm trying to say is, according to the law, any land that was granted by non-Christian leaders, Sultan for example, was considered as null and void. Another example is the US used their power to encourage agricultural migration from a heavily populated region to Mindanao. And their reason was because they thought that the Moro were incapable to nurture the native island. So they encouraged the Christian Filipino and other Filipinos to migrate there and contribute to the country's economic growth. So as more and more outcomers settled in that island, it has gradually reconstructed the population density, where the Moro were left behind as minorities in their own homeland. With that being said, the US conquest was truly a devastating period for the Bangsamoro of Mindanao in the southern Philippines. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a very good day. Bye!